So what I'd like to talk with you a little bit about today is the elusive requirement. And when we go to develop things, a lot of times we spend months, years, sometimes decades chasing a requirement. And when you're innovating, very often that's a hard thing to find. So before I get started, at the end of the presentation, there'll be free T-shirts and power managers for every attendee. That's a several $1,000 value. All you got to do is fill out the survey form, and not really. That's your April Fool's start to the presentation. Sorry. So the dilemma we have is that when you look at what it means to innovate, innovating is by definition solving a problem in a new way or looking at a challenge in a new way than is the traditional way of doing it. A requirement in DoD parlance is a statement of how to solve a problem given using known and understood ways of looking at it. So exactly the opposite of an innovation. And the problem we have, those of us innovating and making new pieces of equipment, is that traditional DoD acquisition is driven based on requirements. So here's a few things that would be incredibly useful to the military, and yet there is no requirement for them anywhere. You know, a time machine. Think how many times it would be great to say, could I just go back 24 hours and do that again? But there is no requirement for a time machine. There's no requirement for a phaser or an arc reactor. That'd be incredibly useful. But if somebody had one, they couldn't buy it because there's no requirement for it. Mr. Fusion, a transporter, all these things would have enormous military value, but there isn't a requirement for them. So I want to relate this to power managers. Does everybody or anybody know what a power manager is before I start? Bill knows what a power manager is. So a power manager is a little device. Here's one. There's another one on the table over there that takes energy from kind of any source that you have available, and it translates it to what you need. So that if I've got one kind of battery and a different kind of radio that is not compatible, I plug them in, it recognizes what they are, it does conversion if it's needed, and to the user, it's just power magic. You plug stuff in and it works. And so what I want to talk about is the journey of that from an idea to reality and how this quest for requirements fits into the whole thing. And so where it really started was with a Air Force Research Labs program making fuel cells. And we were traditionally a fuel cell company. We were making these really energy-dense solutions for warfighters. And the challenge was that a fuel cell has one voltage out. And the guys that the AFRL were trying to support had 5 different pieces of gear, none of which used the same voltage. And so they needed something that would translate the one output from the fuel cell into lots of different things. And so the power manager was born. Now, what they had envisioned was something that was specific for their battlefield airmen, so a forward air controller, and those 5 specific pieces of equipment that they used. So it was not terribly versatile, but it was useful to that specialty. We were fortunate to take that technology, take a prototype of that to a group of Army folks out at Fort Polk and show them the concept. And it was amazing to see, and these were not scientists, these were users that were there in training. And their eyes lit up and they said, this would save me so much weight. I could really use this. But I don't use those 5 pieces of gear. I use a different set of gear. And in fact, among the 10 guys we had there, each of them used different sets of gear. So we needed to be able to universal or make it general purpose so it would work with any piece of gear. But we had that reaction that was, I need one, I don't want to give you your prototype back. So we took that to the standard labs, to CERDEC and NSRDEC and PEO Soldier, who would equip them, and they looked at the idea and they said, wow, nobody here is in charge of power managers. Not me. So nobody wanted to touch it because there was no requirement for it, and nobody associated it with their job. And so everyone said, yeah, that's great, but not for me. We got really lucky. And about 5 years ago, there was a limited user test of the Net Warrior system, sponsored by PEO Soldier out at Fort Riley. And they wanted to showcase some new power technologies at the LUT and see what kind of soldier reaction they got. The Power Manager was not one of those technologies. It was fuel cells, a precursor to the INI generator, various power generation technologies, but the Power Manager, it didn't fit. However, we managed to get PEO Soldier, and Steve Mapes was a great driver of this. He agreed to take it along to let the people running the exercise to use. And the thought being, the average soldier didn't need it because in this exercise, they were using the Net Warrior system, and it was all power inclusive. It didn't need any conversion. So we took it along for the staff to use because they were going to be using traditional devices. And at the last minute, they changed and allowed us to give the Soldier Power Manager to all of the guys running the exercise. When the reviews came in, the guys said, yeah, we like all these fuel cells and generators and stuff like that, but we really love this Power Manager. This is what we want. And PEO Soldier heard that, and all of a sudden, someone at CERDEC stood up and said, okay, Power Managers are going to be mine. Someone at NATIC stood up and said, okay, Power Managers are going to be mine. And with that feedback from the field, the train started moving, and eventually, we actually got to the point of having power management requirements being formed. So my advice for innovators out there with new technologies, the first thing you got to get is field feedback. And it's hard because there's not a lot of investment. Nobody's paying you to get your unit in the field. And in general, end users are hard to come by. They don't, it's not very often that it's made easy for you as industry to meet with an end user. But there are ways to do it. Rapid Equipping Force is one organization that is really good at getting technologies for something where there is no requirement. There's a field need, and they have folks in the field that understand that need. And if REF knows about your product and your technology, when they see a fitting need, they'll call you up and help you get your product in front of a user. FAST teams, or so it's Field Assistant for S&T, is a program RDE-Com runs. Similarly, they've got folks out in theater that are getting needs and bringing them back so that you can get your technology in front of end users. The FAST teams all work through labs. So the request from the field would go to NATIC or CERDEC or one of the other TARDEC, one of the other labs. And so those people need to know about your technology so they can respond with it. GIFIX is a exercise run by the Naval Postgraduate School a couple times a year. It's also a great way to get something in front of end users. XFOB, or which it's been renamed the Expeditionary Energy Concepts by the Marine Corps, is also an opportunity to get things in front of people. Technical evaluation by SOCOM, as well as the NIE exercise with ARCIC. All of these things are ways to get immature technologies in front of users and try to get that aha moment, get the wide-eyed response. If you don't get a wide-eyed response, if you put it in front of the end user and they say, what, I might be able to use that, you need to go back to the drawing board. Go back and figure out what it is that will really solve their acute need. Because if you don't have something that really excites the end users, it's a really long road to trying to get a requirement written and getting your technology into the field. One of the big challenges about this is all of these events are you go on your dime, you take your equipment, they don't pay you for your time, they don't pay you for your equipment. And it's a big investment. Some of these things are a week long, some of them are 2 weeks long. It's a long time to spend out in Camp Roberts, California, or somewhere, or Camp Lejeune, or some place that is not where your home base is. So it's a pretty big commitment, but if you're willing to make the commitment, it can pay off. One of the things that I've touched on several times is when the needs go out, they're going to go to the labs, they're going to go to these organizations. If they don't know your technology exists, they're not going to respond with it. So you have to have relationships with these people. And again, you can meet lots of them here today. Establish those relationships. Go talk to them, quarterly. Don't bug them every week or they won't like you. But establish and maintain those relationships so that they know you, they know your product, and when the need comes up, they'll know how to fit those pieces together and give you a call. Come on. So where we're all trying to get with this is the Holy Grail, the program of record. Program of record is a congressional line item with budget behind it so that you can actually get your equipment acquired. From my experience, count on 5 to 7 years from when you get that first wide-eyed field guy that says, yeah, I need this, to when you see a program of record. You're not going to see requirements start to appear for probably 3 years. It's not a fast process. It takes perseverance. And during that period, and especially those of us with small technology companies, there tends to be a thought up at management, oh, it's developed, we're done, we don't need to invest anymore. It's not the way it works. Investment goes up, not down. Once the product first works and you can put it in the field, you've just started. Because now you got to do mill standard testing. You got to do constant revisions based on what those soldiers tell you. If you don't take their input, you're not going to continue to get that response you want. So there's a lot of your own money involved in getting to this state. So within the U.S. Army, the way you get requirements written is through TRADOC. And they're tasked with writing these requirements, and the requirements are vendor neutral. They're not going to write a requirement that says buy a Protonex Power Manager. That's not how it works. They will write a requirement that says we need something that solves the problem that your technology solves. And so during that 5 to 7 years that this is coming along, chances are if you've got a good idea, some other people are going to come copy it. And so by the time it comes out, you won't be the only game in town. Be prepared for that. If you're early on, if you can get patents, get them. If you can make things that really give you a distinct advantage, invest in the engineering and do it, because very likely you will have competitors by the time it gets to volume. And again, constantly maintain those relationships with the buying organizations, with the labs, with the end user organizations, because all of those guys work together to get this thing through requirements and through into acquisition. Consider partnerships. If you're a small company and you don't have a lot of reach in the DoD, reach out to somebody that makes something similar to what you make, that goes, or not similar, but synergistic, that goes with your gear, that's already in there. Partner with somebody that can help you because they already have the relationships. It's really hard to figure out who the right guy at Rapid Equipping Force is. If you don't know, they don't publish, here's the guys who are interested in your product on the web. So try to find a partner that already knows that. So in summary, I'd like to wrap up with the problem statement. If what you're doing is a new way of going about something, I can almost guarantee you there's no requirement for it. You won't get high volume acquisitions without a requirement. And the first step to getting that requirement is having these wide-eyed end users that absolutely love the capability you're giving them. So use the events, get to the end users, get that reaction, because the acquisition machine listens to it. And once you've got that reaction, you get the ball rolling. You can go through these relationships that you're developing during these years with the acquisition organizations, with the labs, as well as with the guys writing the requirements, and use those relationships to get the requirements and get your product on the radar. It's long, the investment's high, but if you stick with it, the payoff can be very significant. Thanks very much. And questions? Questions, comments? If not, whoop. Oh, a savior, thanks.
So I'm not from the Army, so I'm just wondering, how did you make your initial contact with those groups to do the fast testing? And is there one in particular that you recommend starting with?
So did everybody hear the question? The groups at the Army that you're best linking up with really have to do with the maturity of your technology. So the very early Power Manager work went through the Army Research Office because it was very researchy and not at all ready for prime time. The ARO actually responded to a FAST request from the field, which again goes to the labs, not to industry. And they responded to a FAST request with one of our very early prototypes. So that was the very first time one of those power managers went out into the field. If your technology, if you've managed to get it to a more mature level where you can make something and you can take it outside and it kind of holds together, the CERDEC is a great organization for pulling together technologies and integrating things. And then NATIC, NSRDEC, up in Natick, Massachusetts, is very good at integrating systems where they're taking something that, and typically the transition is it starts at ARO and ARL, then goes to CERDEC, then goes to Natick, then goes to the PEOs who buy it. And so the best place to start really depends on the maturity of your product. That help? Great.